Well, hey there, and welcome to APUS History with Lennox. I'm Lennox, and today we are right in the middle of Unit 2. It covers a time period of 1607 to 1754, and we're going to specifically look today at topic 2.4, the regions of the British colonies. So we're going to dive right into English colonization, and we're going to look at how and why different regions developed within the British Empire in North America. We know there's 13 original colonies, but each of these colonies are part of a region that's a little bit different than the other regions. And so we're going to look a little bit more in depth at that today. We're going to start right at the very beginning with the very first permanent English colony, and that's going to be the colony of Jamestown. Jamestown was founded in 1607, and it was financed by what we call a joint stock company. Now, this is different than what we've seen with previous colonization. If you go all the way back to the Spanish, when they colonized North America, this was a politically funded move. King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, they financially backed colonization in North America. The English, though, are going to take a different approach. A joint stock company is created with a number of investors. So a bunch of people put their money into investing in a new colony, none of them taking the full risk, but also none of them sharing the full profit. But they do share the profit, and that right there is the motivation for the founding of Jamestown. It was an economic and private venture that was occurring here. Now, it didn't start off so well. You see, these guys invested to make a profit, and what they expected was to just show up and make a profit. So their focus originally was finding gold and silver in the Americas. And so when they landed, that's what they did. They hunted for gold, they hunted for silver, they built a fort to protect all the gold and silver they expected to find, but no one planned on eating. I don't know if you realize this, but you can't eat gold. So the first year especially was very difficult in Jamestown. The men who tried to settle there faced famine, they faced starvation, and they barely got through that first year. In fact, Jamestown is going to be a struggle until about the year 1612, when John Rolfe is going to experiment with tobacco and come across a sweeter strain that will become huge in Europe. And once Jamestown starts producing this crop, that's going to become their stability to go forward. Now, what you need to know about tobacco is that it's a very labor-intensive crop. And initially, the labor system that was used in the colony of Jamestown was indentured servants. These were young men who could not afford passage from England over to the New World, so they sold themselves into slavery, essentially. They signed a contract generally for 7 years that if their passage was paid, they would make the journey over here and work as a slave towards a planter, and after 7 years gain their freedom and be able to start their new life. The effect of the success of tobacco is going to lead to a desire for more and more land. And as these indentured servants gain their freedom, they want land as well. So as the colony starts to grow, they are encroaching on Native American lands. The Native Americans started to attack. They attacked farms, they attacked villages, they attacked the people. And so a lot of these people, especially the smaller farmers, went to the royal governor and asked for protection. The governor was William Berkeley, and he said no. It was at this point that a man by the name of Nathaniel Bacon is going to organize the former indentured servants and the small farmers, and they are going to rebel against the government in Virginia. The first thing they do is they're going to start attacking the Native Americans. Then they're going to start attacking the elite planters. They did get the upper hand for a little while, but eventually the rebellion was put down. But what we learned from that rebellion was that indentured servitude was not a sustainable form of labor. So that we needed to find a new source of labor, and the most obvious source had already been introduced by the Spanish, was already in existence in the British West Indies, and that's African slavery. You're going to see a huge increase of African slaves being brought into the British colonies. So that's the Chesapeake region. Let's move north to New England. New England's going to be settled starting in 1620 by the Pilgrims and the Puritans. These were folks who were not happy with the structure and the practices of the Church of England, and so they were seeking a way to worship freely. Now, many people will say today that the Pilgrims and the Puritans came to North America searching for religious freedom. And while that's somewhat true, that's not the whole story. When the Pilgrims first started seeking religious freedom, they went to Holland. Holland offered religious freedom to anybody who lived there. The problem they faced, though, was Holland was an urban center. And these were mostly farmers, so they had a very difficult time economically supporting themselves living in Holland. That's when they returned to England and then sought out an opportunity to go to North America. As I mentioned, they landed in 1620, and though freedom of religion was part of their motivation, you also have to recognize that economics was as well. They couldn't sustain themselves in Holland, but they'll be able to in the New World. Now, while the first few years were difficult for the Pilgrims and the Puritans, they did come through on the other side, and that's going to lead to thousands of Puritans migrating to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. When we look at the economics of the New England region, you'll find that it's based both on agriculture as well as commerce, trade. Another difference between the New England region and the Chesapeake region was that the people of New England wanted to create a society. They wanted settlements. They wanted towns. So you see a lot of families traveling into the New England region. So there's a quick synopsis of the New England region. Let's move further south. And to talk about the southern region, we also have to talk about the British West Indies. Now, the British West Indies, islands like Barbados, they were successful in growing cash crops like tobacco. But over time, they recognized that another crop was going to be even more successful, and that was the crop of sugarcane. Like tobacco, sugarcane is a very labor-intensive crop. And so throughout the British West Indies, the number of African slaves that are being brought in increases every single day, to the point where African slaves outnumbered the planting class. What's going to happen is the planters are going to start passing the first slave codes that we've seen. And these slave codes, for the very first time in history, are going to list African slaves as property. The term for property is chattel. So this is the beginning of chattel slavery in the Western Hemisphere. As you look at the structure in the British West Indies, you're going to see that replicated in Southern society as well, starting in South Carolina. And what you'll see in the Southern region is a large planter class coming in and cash crops starting to be developed. Moving north, we're going to go to another region, and that's the Middle Colonial region, and it was anchored by New York and New Jersey. Now, New York was once the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam. Well, now it's under English control. And what you're going to see there is another colonial region created for economic reasons. And they are going to build their economy based on what we call cereal crops, wheat, and oats and other grains. The other thing that was going on in the New York, New Jersey region is the fact that they had a whole lot of rivers and a lot of waterways and deep water ports. So you're going to see a trade economy develop in this region as well. Now, in the Middle Colonies, you're going to see a very diverse population, but you're going to see a social hierarchy develop in the Middle Colonies led by an elite merchant class. So you had the merchants at the top of this social structure, followed closely by the small business owners. Beneath them were the unskilled workers, and at the bottom was the African slaves. This should seem very familiar to you because we talked about it in Unit 1 with the Spanish caste system. But one colony within the Middle Colonies, Pennsylvania, was different. Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. He was a Quaker and a pacifist, and he is going to start this colony based on those values. First of all, Pennsylvania was a heterogeneous society where they welcomed everyone. Every religion was welcome in Pennsylvania. Another difference is going to be the relationship between the Pennsylvania colonists and the Native Americans. Unlike other regions where land was just taken, in Pennsylvania, they actually negotiated with the Native Americans. So that's a good overview of all the colonial regions. But one thing that they did have in common is that they all had some form of a democratic self-government. Self-government was necessary in the colonies due to their great distance from England. They had to govern themselves. And so you started to see these government structures being created in every single region. For example, in Virginia, you have the House of Burgesses, which was formed in 1619. This was a representative body that governed the colony of Virginia. Up in the New England region, when the Pilgrims came ashore, they signed the Mayflower Compact. And the Mayflower Compact was one of the first written forms of government and created a self-governing congregation in the Plymouth colony, which would later evolve into democratic town meetings throughout New England. And then throughout the middle and the southern colonies, you had all sorts of representative governmental bodies. But make no mistake, throughout them all, it was the elites who controlled the government during this time period. But that's for another video. So that's a quick overview of the regions of the British colonies. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.